Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeffy Hickman. I'm the principal here at University High. I have with me Olivia Kahn, and she is a nurse from the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, and she will be presenting our information tonight. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat and in the Q&A, and we will answer them for you as we go. Let me share my screen. And then also, if you have questions in Spanish, we will be answering those at the end of the presentation.
All right.
Okay, Olivia, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeffy. I'm so excited to be joining you guys. I actually grew up in Fresno, so I am well familiar with University High. I am working as a family nurse practitioner over at Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. And did all of my training back east at the University of Pennsylvania before coming back here. So Tiffany Sim, a pediatric nurse practitioner I work with, helped me develop this PowerPoint, but I will be flying solo tonight. So we can go ahead and get started. All right. It might feel like, is this even relevant that we're talking about the COVID vaccine right now? And I would say absolutely yes. So today is September 1st, if I haven't lost track. And as of the 30th of August, Fresno County, over 40 new cases per 100,000, which is well in the purple tier if we were still using that system. We have a test rate of about 3,000 were diagnosed with COVID over the last week in our county. Unfortunately, 11 people passed from COVID and 65 more people were hospitalized. So COVID still very much is out there, and we recognize that medical decisions are, they're personal and can be intimidating. So we want to empower you to have as much information as possible as you make this decision. So we're going to be focusing on the Pfizer vaccine tonight. There are multiple types of vaccines in the world and multiple types of vaccines to prevent COVID, but Pfizer is the one that is approved for students down to 12 years old. So we'll be focusing on that. That is an mRNA type of vaccine, and phrased as new technology a lot. That's correct, but I think a lot of people have been associated it with mRNA as new technology, which that part is not so true. That's actually part of your basic biology, whether or not you get the vaccine. You can't fight that one. So I'm going to back up a little bit just so we can get some comfort level. So mRNA is probably what you're more familiar with. That stores your genes, kind of like the manual to how your whole body works. That manual then produces, is part of the production process for proteins, which are the workhorses, which actually carry out the functions in your body. DNA on its own, though, doesn't do anything. It's like a mix unopened. mRNA is the in-between. So it's like instructions that is designed from the DNA that goes to something called ribosomes to actually make the protein. So those processes, transcription, translation, for any kids in biology, that's probably old news. But we can stick with it. So how that relates to the vaccines, the goal of vaccination is always to intentionally and minimally expose a person to a specific disease-causing germ. That can be done with the dead part of the virus, a weakened just part of the germ. And then once your body is exposed, your body produces the antibodies to actually fight the germ in real life. What mRNA is doing is it actually skips a small part of the process. It delivers a pre of the mRNA directly to the body, where a protein is produced. It's part of a spike protein that is on the actual virus, SARS-CoV-2, that causes COVID. It's too small and it's too incomplete to actually cause COVID. So it in no way is capable of doing that. But what it does do is it trains your body to an immune response to that spike protein, so that when SARS-CoV-2 is introduced to your body, it's all ready to fight it. We can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so these are cartoony, get a good idea. So mRNA creating that spike protein, which gives you some idea that it works with T cells to actually produce the system, and provides long-term and very effective protection we've got a more thorough video that we're going to link at the end, produced by Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So if you want to understand a little bit more of the really complex immune process, I'd recommend giving that a look. You can go to the right, great. So this is my colleague's slide, and it's just a helpful reminder. The vaccine using has been studied for decades. It is new as far as this is the first vaccine that's been approved, but it will likely be the future vaccines. Part of the reason we were able to develop it so quickly is because we're going to grow the virus again and again and again and weaken it and manipulate it because it's actually harder to copy mRNA than it is to do the other processes. So we be using this to fight future versions of COVID, as well as other outbreaks like Ebola and COVID that frankly, we weren't able to make a vaccine fast enough to be useful for. So it's a good thing. There's another video at the end too, which also explains the development of mRNA vaccines if you're curious. So, all right, next slide. Okay. So is the vaccine actually safe for teenagers? Absolutely, yes. So it is authorized by the FDA for children ages 12 and up. It's an emergency approval 15, and it is full approval 16 and up. It's the same vaccine. They didn't change it after it got fully approved. And it is actually probably one of the most thoroughly monitored vaccines in the history of the world. Also, just for reference, Pfizer's clinical trial did monitor between 2,000 and 3,000 adolescents, and it demonstrated 100% efficacy at preventing symptomatic COVID. So wildly effective, much, much more effective than any other vaccine we've been able to develop so far. So one thing that we do want to mention is that it is being evaluated in younger kids too. We're hoping that we're able to move things along so that younger kids who maybe don't have optimal protection but do have comorbidities will be able to receive it sooner rather than later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what are the risks? We always encourage families, consider risks and benefits. Every decision in life certainly does come with risks, and the vaccine does have risks, but I always want those to be considered in the bigger picture. So we can talk about what some of those are. Go to the next slide. So what to expect after this vaccine. So these are things that when I hear it, I'm not surprised at all, not worried, even when they're kind of unpleasant. So most people have a milder reaction after the first dose. It's a 2-dose regimen. For people that before, they seem to have a stronger reaction on the first dose. People have reported being very, very sore on their arms. And some people will even have headache, body aches, fever, nausea, vomiting. But that's actually a good sign that your body is producing antibodies. You can easily treat those with Tylenol, ibuprofen, naproxen if necessary. I have heard some people reference clotting with this vaccine. That is actually not the case. It's a very rare side effect of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It has not been associated with the Pfizer vaccine. I do want to touch back on the mRNA. I want to clarify too, your body has a system for clearing mRNA after use. So mRNA does not interact with your DNA. It does not enter the nucleus, and it is harmlessly disposed of the system your body already uses by the minute. Okay, next slide. So there are some rarer side effects that are real. So anaphylaxis occurs in 5 out of every million doses we give. So that's not very common by any means. Anaphylaxis is readily treated with an injection. Every place that gives COVID vaccines is required to have epinephrine on site. Allergies to consider: polyethylene glycol. Actually, that is Miralax, but it's also something that's used in like as a filler for some other injections. Polysorbate, there's some debate whether or not it's just a cross reaction with the polyethylene glycol. And we do consider previous anaphylaxis to another vaccine something to be cautious of, but not a flat out, you can't get the vaccine. Um, if you're concerned about your allergies, I do to talk with the pediatrician or primary. But for reference, allergies to things like peanuts or things like pollens do not increase the chance of anaphylaxis substantially in any. We have, I've worked in an allergy practice and we certainly recommended them for those as well. Myocarditis is the one that's been in the news a lot recently, especially for teenagers. It occurs in about 2 out of every 50,000 males between the ages 16 and 39. Now, when they did the original study, it didn't look like myocarditis was more common at all, actually. But once they stratified or looked specifically at age and was more common in this age group and in this gender. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle, and it actually occurs really commonly after people have other kinds of viruses. It's usually mild, short-lived, self-resolving. People say they have some chest pain and feel a little short of breath. There are even rarely more serious cases. But I do think it is worth noting that let's out of 50,000 consistently get myocarditis vaccine. For those that get COVID, it'll be 600 out of 50,000. So it's actually somewhat unusual to be able to compare the potential side effect and the condition. But in this case, we can, and the condition poses a far, far, far risk than the vaccine. And you could potentially count on not getting COVID, but I don't think you do that for yourself. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so what about long-term side effects? That is a good question. And Jeffy, go ahead and let me know if my internet is I just got a flag saying my internet's unstable, so let me know if I get fuzzy. So this one I feel like is a pretty good question, but when we look at the history of all of the vaccines we've ever developed, we do see some long-term side effects. For example, a very long time ago, we used a weakened version of polio to give as a polio vaccine, and some people actually got polio. That created really long-term serious effects. But for all of the serious vaccine reactions we've seen in all of history, they have all shown up within 6 weeks of the last vaccine. So we don't seem to see these reactions develop years down the line, like I know a lot of people are concerned. So whenever a vaccine is developed, it has to be monitored for a little bit beyond 6 weeks to make sure that there aren't any unexpected side effects. But after that, we're not terribly concerned. On the flip side, viruses often cause long-term side effects that sometimes manifest years down the line. So for example, for chickenpox, I had chickenpox as a kid. I have a pretty developing shingles in my lifetime because the virus reactivated after essentially storing in my nervous system. Children who got the varicella vaccine to prevent chickenpox do not seem to have that risk at all. So it does seem the vaccine is always safer, both short and long term. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, affect my child's fertility. It's another question I've heard a lot. Early on, it was the answer because clinical trials intentionally didn't recruit pregnant women, which is commonly how we approach clinical trials. They're not the first group we recruit from, but I think it was close to 20 women did become pregnant during the trial. No negative effects were discovered whatsoever, even though they had received the vaccine. And since then, about 200 million have been given in the United States. And people have conceived, they have been pregnant while getting the vaccine and breastfed. There has not been any negative repercussions documented. It's least safe for people. Again, going back to unfortunately, COVID seems to affect pregnant women really severely. In my field, it's not uncommon to hear of a pregnant woman unfortunately delivering early because of COVID, and there have been a number of deaths of women shortly after delivery. So I do seriously. Um, on a different note, after infection, men also seem to be less fertile for about 3 to 6 months. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what about the variants? There's a lot of questions of, if I am going to get Delta anyway, why would I even get the vaccine? Are the vaccines causing the variants? Those are also pretty good questions. So what I will say, just to start off with, the vaccine is still highly effective against all of the variants. It's probably the least Delta, but right now, over 99% of the people in the hospital with COVID are unvaccinated. So while it's less effective at preventing infection, it's still more effective at preventing severe infection and death. So that's important to remember. But also, variants develop over time through clinically significant mutations. So they have to keep replicating to have that opportunity to mutate. So the more we're able to move through more quickly, the more variants we're going to see. And so even though the vaccine isn't 100%, it does slow down the virus a lot. People are way less likely to get infected. They seem to shed less virus, and they're infectious for less time. So getting vaccinated could be part of infectious disease doctors I know says it takes a highly vaccinated population to stop variants. So that's what we're hoping to move towards. Okay. All right. So again, this is benefits. If there was no risk with COVID, I would not recommend the vaccine. Risks, but I think the risks of COVID are actually substantial and well documented. So far, COVID has infected millions of kids and caused over 40,000 hospitalizations. Luckily, it hasn't caused statistically nearly as many deaths in children, but they can also still spread the illness to more vulnerable populations. Over 600,000 Americans have died to date. And of note, those counts are accurate. I know that people were concerned, I think about a year ago, when the CDC listed that a lot of the death certificates had multiple causes of death. But just for reference, when a death certificate is written out, usually multiple causes are listed. So for example, with COVID, usually the other thing listed was respiratory failure or pneumonia. Those are really common, and other comorbidities to be considered are obesity. Statistically, that's pretty likely in America. If someone dies with COVID in a car accident, it is not listed under cause of death. It's listed under other on their death certificate, just for reference. So a lot of people don't die from COVID, and I'm sure you know many, but people also can suffer from long haul COVID, which can cause really substantial debilitating symptoms. So I don't even fully understand. For example, I've had patients come in who have developed asthma that seems to have been developed with a completely different way than how asthma is normally developed in the Central Valley. Some people are developing type 1 diabetes, and psychiatric conditions are actually common after COVID. So just because you don't die from it doesn't mean you don't suffer from it for a long time. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. Okay, and so my colleague and I, sorry, it's what are our experiences? I guess what are my experiences with the vaccine? So as Tiffany and I were developing this PowerPoint, we talked about, of course, we've heard lots of different theories about the vaccine. So we wanted to address the ones that were a little bit more substantiated. And the first, we want to tell you, we really don't see any evidence of a microchip in the vaccine. We do feel that if the government wanted to track you, they would probably use your cell phone. Tiffany and I are both vaccinated. Neither of us are magnetized. And we also feel compelled to tell you that modern nickel aren't normally picked up by magnets. So even if that were true, that video of a woman sticking coins in herself doesn't seem to check out. Over 200 million people have received the vaccine, and it really does seem to be effective. For reference, 96% of physicians are vaccinated. And once you account for physicians who have treated COVID patients, it's nearly 100%. Tiffany and I both have had COVID and serious infections, and neither of us have any comorbidities. We also got the vaccine as soon as it was offered to us, and dragged our entire families to go get it when it was offered to them too, including the teenagers in our families. So we are not by any means recommending something that we haven't done for our own families. It won't prevent 100% of infections, but it does prevent serious illness. So for a lot of people, it can be a matter of life and death. So you to seriously consider it, especially since so many people seem to underestimate their risk. I've talked with so many people who self-identify as low risk, but either their age or a condition they have like asthma or an immunocompromising condition, or even their weight can actually place them at high risk. So even if you're not comfortable right now, we recommend to discuss it with your primary, with your pediatrician, and whatever you do, make sure you get good information versus. We can next slide where I've linked a few things. So the first one is, if you are interested, you can get a COVID vaccine just about anywhere right now. Yep, so that links you through. And there are lots of vaccination events. The flyers are more towards the bottom. You can schedule an appointment, or you can go to like pretty much any Walgreens or CVS to get the vaccine, which is great. Besides feeling sore and maybe achy, I would say that it's well worth the effort. Other links that we have on there are a couple of explanation videos. So we've got this link for the COVID Vaccine Center. They have answered just about every question you can think of. And if they haven't answered it, you can actually enter it. And they have some world-renowned experts who will answer it for you. I worked next door to them. They are truly top-notch. People fly from all over the world to see them. And if you did answer here, that's a good place to start. Then they produced how the vaccines work. I think it does a good job of not making it overly complicated, but also the immune system is complicated. The things that I've seen refuting the vaccine give really simple explanations. And if something is that simple, it's often not the whole story. So that's a good reference point. And if any biology, they might appreciate it. The development of mRNA vaccines, that one's a goofier video. It does explain exactly how we got here and how we were able to do it quickly. I would say it's a feat of the human spirit that we are where we are. It might seem fast, but the need was also really great. We've never seen international collaboration between academic centers, research centers, and government like we did for these developments of these vaccines. And then if you're feeling really ambitious, I actually linked the study that was published right before the vaccine was approved by the FDA. It is really heavy reading, but I've also heard a lot of people say, I want to look at the study myself. So there you go. You can take a look at it. It's dense, but it's all there. So I hope this was a good primer on the COVID vaccine, at least the one that's approved for your teenager. And at this time, I'd be happy to take any questions. Jeffy, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear from you too.
Yes, some of the questions that have come through are having to do with, lately there especially in Fresno and Tulare counties about, there's this horse dewormer thing that people can take that instead of taking the COVID vaccine. What do you think about that? Or what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually feel really equipped to answer it because my dad is a horse vet. So I am really familiar with ivermectin and its appropriate. So ivermectin was initially introduced when we were trying to figure out, are there any medications that we already have that work really well in treating? So ivermectin was used in Australia primarily. They were treating in a combination with azithromycin and a couple of other things. It looked like maybe it was helping in some small studies. So that's probably where most people have heard it. But where it gets more complicated is once I did bigger studies and tried to look specifically at ivermectin, it seemed like it was probably the other things that were helping, especially the oral steroids that were helping. So there is that. I new evidence about ivermectin, but the other study cited a lot is that it killed COVID right on the spot. But that was done in a test tube, not a person. So it was used at a much, much higher dose than is appropriate in humans. And ivermectin is not harmless. It actually can cause really severe neurologic conditions. As I know from veterinary medicine, when an animal overdoses on ivermectin, they actually will go blind, usually temporarily, but that is pretty scary. So I really don't recommend using it on your own. Please don't self-dose. And I think you'll find most medical doctors are not willing to prescribe it to you right now. If the evidence changes, I'm always happy. Yeah. Questions you got from
what other things would you say to people that are hesitant to get the vaccine?
Well, it's an interesting question because when people are hesitant, I primarily want to hear why. I hear a lot of people who are nervous about this. So I certainly know COVID is real. They know it's serious, but they're not sure that it's really worth the risk of something so new in order to prevent something that they're hoping and they're trying to avoid. And I understand that. I think it's natural and it's normal to be nervous about new technology. And certainly we've lived through really uncertain times. I think trust in governing bodies is, and I get that. I mean, one of the things that I primarily say, and actually part of the reason I got my vaccine less than 2 months after I had COVID was because I wanted people to know that I did it for me and I took every single person that I loved to go get their vaccine when they could. So as far as I get asked all the time, what would you do if it was you? And I usually really try to that station because what's right for me isn't necessarily right for you. I can't be prescriptive like that. But I can say that I was eager to protect them. I would also say that we sure do hear a lot of people once they have serious COVID saying they wish they'd gotten the vaccine. And it's really heartbreaking because we do have treatments for COVID, but none are as effective as the vaccine. So what the vaccine also doesn't work in the middle of the illness. So I would just encourage you really think about it. Even if you feel like you're low risk, consider people you love who aren't. COVID is really unusual in the way that asymptomatic carriers are a huge threat. It's not like other illnesses where we don't have that huge asymptomatic population. So really do be aware. I've lost family members, I've lost friends, I've lost coworkers to COVID, all before the vaccine was developed. So I really do encourage you. I'm not paid by anyone besides Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. I don't have any super big political affiliations. I just want to see people be healthy. And so I would hope that anyone who's hesitant would be open to that conversation. But
I think the best analogy that I have heard is when people say, well, I'm healthy and I'll be able to fight it, is a good analogy is to say that as if you were in a car accident without a seatbelt, that you'll say, but I'll just brace myself.
right. Right.
You can brace yourself as best as you can, but if it's that big of a car accident without a seatbelt, we all wear seatbelts now because that's what we do. It's what we're supposed to do. So
and because the evidence is there, right? And I would say the evidence is there for the vaccine. And I mean, just for reference, my younger sister who got COVID along with me is a professional ballerina. She is as healthy as they get. I am not a professional ballerina, but don't have any comorbidity. We were like not really able to walk across a room without starting to turn a little blue. We probably should have gone to the hospital, but chose not to. And I just say for reference, if you really think you're healthier than a 20-year-old ballerina, like good for you. But people aren't able to, as you said, brace themselves against the dashboard. The windshield as a seatbelt by the end. So
Right.
yeah, that's a good analogy. I'll probably borrow that in the future.
Sure. Well, those were the main, I think you answered most of the questions just through your presentation, and we will be sure to put this on our website. Thank you so much, Olivia. We are really appreciative to you for taking this time, and then also for the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools for their support during this. We're happy to be back in school, and we're happy to have a large number of UHS students that are vaccinated so that we can stay in school and help protect our families against COVID. And just a reminder to our families out there, we do have COVID tests. They are taking about 48 to 72 hours. So you can contact us if you need a test. You know, they're available everywhere as well. But if you feel more comfortable coming here to UHS, please contact Mr. Morgan, and he can get you a COVID test. Because in taking care of our students and taking care of you, we're all here together to we want you all to be healthy. So with that, we will sign off, and we will have this posted on our website. Thank you so much. This will also post the PowerPoint so that you can link to these great resources that Olivia has put together for us. So thank you, Olivia. We appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Signing off. Bye.
Okay.